like the word says. Issues really eval data sheets to instrument engineer. The really eval data sheets describe all the conditions. And here is another review that the process engineer has to do. When the bids come from vendors, they come to whom? Which department? Procurement is the right word. Procurement passes it on to people who are responsible for instruments. That's the instrument engineers. And they have to, the instrument engineers have to make sure that the review by process engineer is done. Issues equipment data sheets to mechanical specialists. Now these equipment data sheets are process equipment data sheets with process information, including sizing for stationary equipment or sizing data for stationary equipment. And then the mechanical specialist, the heat transfer people. Anybody here from heat transfer? Good. Okay. Oscar, right, is your name? Good. The rotating equipment people, David is one of them. Another one back there. So you guys get the process equipment data sheets from process engineers, vessel people. And when the bids come in, before that, when the specifications are prepared, these are mechanical data sheets for rotating machinery, for heat transfer equipment, for vessels, columns, must be reviewed by the process engineer before they go out to vendors. And when the vendor bids come in, the reverse takes place. The data that from the vendor goes to procurement, mechanical specialist, process engineer for review. Reviews equipment vendor drawings. That's like vendor bids. When the equipment gets purchased and the equipment outlines, equipment data sheets filled out by the vendor, and equipment details come in, they have to be reviewed by process. Identify special valves. I already mentioned that in case of special control valves. Assigns numbers to piping specialty items. That's just the housekeeping type of work. And piping specialty data sheets. That's another kind of data sheets. We'll deal with those a little bit more in the second part of today's session. And again, when the vendor drawings come back, same thing, they come back to procurement, they pass it on to the specialist, and the specialist makes sure that the process engineer reviews them. Any questions on this? Everybody understands perfectly? Or should we turn the lights on more? There were studies in the past actually to divert a little bit that when the lights are turned down, people feel like they've been, paid attention or taken notice of, and when they are turned up, the same thing happens. So there's no difference whether the lights go up or down. People get a little bit more excited. I don't know why. Okay, so the process engineer also reviews all kinds of drawings, and model that is prepared by piping is one of the type of drawings. This is those things that we have built in our heads, and now we can see them on the model. We can see equipment with proper sizes, piping with proper dimensions. It looks almost like real, except in small dimension. So process engineer, he or she, will review the models for accuracy, that some pipe that was intended to be 6-inch is not shown as 2-inch by mistake. Accessibility and operability. If you have done any model reviews, you will have had this little man, an imaginary little figure, walking around your model in cyberspace. And that little man, or a woman, the operator, is walking around, and you can judge whether the valves that you intended to be operated frequently, whether those valves are accessible by this little imaginary figure, or whether they are not. And you can judge also the relationship, whether they can actually operate them. If they're accessible, but they're accessible like this, it's not really very convenient, okay? Because people need some strength while they are operating, especially big valves. Checks vessel nozzle placement for elevation. Now that's for hydraulics. It's important from that aspect. And orientation. Now when the vessel drawings are prepared, the nozzle could be here, could be here, could be here, could be the right elevation, but it might not be correctly placed in relationship to a downcomer in the tower, for example, in the distillation column. It might not be placed correctly in relationship to some temperature gauge. If the stream is coming in, you want to be able to read that temperature, so you want the two of them to be close together rather than the opposite side where the temperature will not be read. So anytime we have a model, the process engineer is going to be looking for these things and making sure that the process will operate, that the data that the operator needs will be there. Am I making sense? Yes? Okay, who doesn't understand? Because there's going to be a quiz. Okay, everybody understand? Reviews P&IDs by vendors. Remember we mentioned the auxiliary P&IDs that are prepared by vendors, and we want to make sure that they will operate properly, that the system that they will provide will operate properly, that the seal oil will circulate through the bearings of the compressor, for example, and it'll be cooled properly and all that. Process engineer needs to make sure so that when the vendor prints come in into the specialist department, rotating machinery, they have to be reviewed by process. Incorporates vendor drawing details. That comes down in the P&ID development process somewhere at the end. All the little gauges that the vendor provided for free and have not been requested, have not been on the P&ID before. All the little connections, extra connections that the vendor is providing for free because that's their standard. We didn't ask for them. Those have to be reflected on the P&ID. And then we talked about minding the schedule. So P&IDs have to be issued when promised. Prepares and issues revision descriptions. Do we provide revision descriptions all the time? No. No, we don't. There's going to be a certain stage. I have a table there. There's a HAZOP in the middle of that right-hand column. That's the point when the P&IDs are issued for HAZOP, that the revision description listing for every P&ID from there on needs to be provided by the process engineer. And then there are various summaries that the process engineer needs to prepare. Line summaries is one of them. This, again, is like like those line numbers, line summaries are normally, should be in piping engineers, piping designers domain. But we have ported them into process engineering. Process engineer maintains a master P&ID up to a design issue. Remember the freeze point? When the freeze point is reached, the process engineer still maintains a process master, but the main master is now a responsibility of the piping department after the design issue. Okay, shall we take a break? 10 minutes?